Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, 4 o'clock in the morning of October 5th, 1970. A nurse's assistant had been called into a patient's room several times throughout the night, as he claimed that his sleep had been disturbed by an odd sight. The man claimed to see monkeys swinging in the trees outside of his window. Finally, the nurse decided to take a look for herself. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Zelia Edgar. Now, this is a shorter case, but one that, in my opinion, offers a really unique look at the phenomenon. The reporting witness was an unnamed nurse's assistant and mother of 4, who in October of 1970 worked 2 nights a week the night shift at a hospital somewhere near Sturgeon Bay. Now, this particular night, that of October 5th, a patient who, for the record, she did describe as pesky and always complaining about something, kept ringing the bell asking for assistance. She answered it each time, thinking little of it, until the last ring, which occurred around 4 in the morning. As she answered this call, she found the patient sitting at the edge of the bed, insistent that there were monkeys, swinging in the trees and sitting on the window ledge outside of his window. Now, by this point, she said that the drapes were closed, but she believed that he may have been looking through them prior to calling her. There was a slight crack in the drapes through which the witness could see a bright light streaming into the room. So she got the patient back to bed and then went to check out the window for herself. Now, this was the first time she took any notice of the window, as this was the first time the patient had mentioned the monkeys outside of it. It was not, as you may have expected, a barrel of monkeys. No, instead the witness claimed to see a large yellow-green balloon-like object with cast a beam of intense white light. She described the lighting and color of the object as diffuse and pulsating. Now, later calculations made by an aerial phenomena research organization investigator concluded that the object, including the beam of light, was about 100 feet long, hovering about 20 feet off the ground and about 100 feet away from the hospital. So, pretty dang big and pretty dang close. The witness claimed that she was so just absolutely shocked by the object that she, quote, stood there paralyzed for about 5 minutes, transfixed by the sight that she was seeing. Finally, the object started to move up and off. Now, the witness claimed that at this point the color changed to a kind of orange glow around the object, and at this point the shock or spell was finally broken, and she went to grab another nurse, but by the time they arrived back in the room, all that remained of the sighting was a faint white glow, which gradually faded. Now, this is a funky little case, and the first question that I have is, did the initial witness, the patient, actually see monkeys outside his window? Now, to clarify, when I say did he actually see monkeys, I don't mean were there actually monkeys, but is that what he saw? Now, the reporting witness saw a giant spherical object with a beam of light projected from it, but I think that there are a few options for the first witness. Now, the first option is, of course, that he didn't really see anything. It's sheer coincidence that he calls the nurse in because he's had a dream or something that there are monkeys outside his window, or hey, maybe he was just monkeying around. And there just so happens to be a UFO outside of his window instead of monkeys. The second is that the light may have been involved in some sort of secondary way. It woke him up, disturbed his sleep, and in this hypnagogic state he envisioned monkeys outside the window in some sort of waking dream. Now, this seems like a perfectly valid option and kind of likely because, a light comes in the window, disturbs his sleep, it's interrupted, he wakes up and is in this state. So those are kind of the first two options. An equally valid option, in my opinion at least, is that the light was intrinsically connected with the patient's sighting. Maybe the light woke him up, he went to check the window, and saw monkeys swinging from the trees outside. Again, not actual monkeys, but that is what he actually saw. Now, if we can take that witness's account, this case is fascinating for the fact that 2 people looked at the same anomaly and saw 2 completely different things. One saw a loose barrel of monkeys, and the other a giant pulsating UFO, and I'll get back to that topic in just a second. The reporting witness claimed that she didn't even connect the monkeys with the UFO sighting until the APRO investigator, Mr. Andropoulos, told her about the infamous Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, one of the great classics of UFO occupant sightings. I do find it kind of interesting that this connection was made, seeing as in this case, you have 2 witnesses, one saw a craft and one entities, whereas in the Kelly Hopkinsville case, you have this kind of mass sighting of craftless entities, and then a few scattered UFO sightings in the area, only one of which was had by one member of the household prior to the sighting of the, entities or occupants. Regarding the reporting witness's part of this sighting, she claimed that she was just absolutely transfixed or paralyzed by the shock of seeing this craft. And I mean, this mirrors countless other witnesses who claim that they kind of lose their senses or lose their sense of urgency or of normalcy while observing anomalies. And the spell in this case was only broken when the craft begins to move off. Now, I do find this interesting, and I wonder if, is it just the shock of seeing something so extra mundane that you don't know what to do, or is this some sort of effect produced by the anomaly? I also find it interesting that at the only juncture where there were two witnesses looking at this thing, whatever it was, at the same time, all that remained was a faint light. And yet again, too, the light is the first thing that attracted the reporting witness's attention. Now, I think that this points to one of Keel's great concepts, that the only real aspect of these anomalies in all of these cases may be the light, and everything else is some sort of mask and kind of auxiliary to the main center of the encounter. Here again, taking both the initial witnesses and the reporting witnesses' statements as of equal value, you have two people looking at something. We don't know what it is, but it's something, and the light really seems to be kind of the integral part. That's what attracted the reporting witness's attention, and that's what remained when she got the other nurse, who was effectively a third witness to something less dramatic than the monkeys or the UFO, but still to some sort of vague, faded white light. However, the first witness observes or maybe translates this disturbance as a group of monkeys sitting on the window ledge and swinging in the trees, whereas the second witness observes or translates it into a giant UFO. While on the face of it, a group of monkeys in the trees of Sturgeon Bay sounds pretty ridiculous, so too does a silent, hovering, 100-foot-long object. Discrepancies beyond the typical differences of, two different witnesses' observation, they seem to just occur every now and again in anomalous encounters. One of my personal favorites is the Nottingham anomaly, in which a group of boys saw a strange fog that for two of them seemed to transform into some monstrous clawed creature, while the third boy didn't see that at all. He just saw the fog. Now, rather than detracting from these encounters, I genuinely think that it adds to the concept that these anomalies are not as they appear to be, and that the truth of them is hidden behind masks as countless as those who witness them. 6 young people arrived at Bent's Basin, New South Wales, in an old sedan, parked the car, and ate a small picnic which they had brought. They had come to investigate the unusual reputation of the area, which was well known for paranormal phenomena. They decided to move closer to a nearby lake as dusk fell, and got in the vehicle, went to start the car, and it wouldn't start. It was then that one member of the party noticed a strange object resting on a nearby hill. Now, this case occurred on June 4th, 1972, but it wasn't reported until much later, July of 1975, because the reporting witness, known across all reports simply as Mr. S., had a more recent sighting of some anomalous lights over Sydney that he was reporting, and he happened to mention this previous sighting, which is quite a bit more dramatic than just kind of a simple flyby of nocturnal lights. No offense to flyby nocturnal light sightings, those are really cool too. This case definitely encompasses a little bit more high strangeness just than that, as we'll see in a minute here. Now, in June of 1972, Mr. S was one of a group of 6 young people, 4 men and 2 women, who decided to go to Bent's Basin, which is just south of Wallachia in New South Wales, Australia. This place had a history of paranormal phenomena, and they wanted to see it for themselves. So they arrived in the basin, parked, ate a small picnic, and decided to set off for a spot closer to the lake, kind of the nucleus of the basin, apparently. By this time, it was about 6 in the evening. So they decided to go closer to the lake. The driver got in the vehicle to start the car, and surprise, surprise, it didn't start. One of the other boys got out of the car and went to look under the hood, and after being startled by a too early attempt to restart the vehicle, he turned around and saw a bizarre object resting on the top of a nearby hill. He told the others to come look at it, and a few of them got out. Some just turned and looked out the car windows, except for one girl who refused to even look at the object and apparently hid under the dashboard. Hey, she may have had the right idea, as we'll see in a minute. They described this object as looking like 2 saucers stuck together, appearing about 20 feet in diameter and only about 4 to 5 feet high, resting on 3 or 4 triangular-shaped legs. They claimed that the top half was a pink color and the bottom half a blood red, which pulsed from one to the other, kind of alternating, again, this pink and this blood red color. They claimed that the object, while appearing luminous, did not give off light. Now, they said that this pulsing kind of switch of the colors kind of synchronized with a strong hum, which also synchronized with sudden and severe headaches in all of the witnesses, excluding the girl who hid, which, again, all of these different phenomena, the headaches, the lights, and the hum, pulsated in the same rhythm. Finally, they got the car going and fled downhill towards the lake area. They didn't get very far, however, when they heard a thump on the roof of the vehicle and the engine started on fire. They all jumped out of the vehicle, which rolled unceremoniously towards a bunch of trees. Figuring they had to get out of there somehow, two of the boys began walking up the road to find someone that they could hitch a ride with. No sooner did they walk off, did they come running back. The two boys claimed that they had heard a strange whining noise, along with a soft, whirling, windy noise, at which point they had seen a huge man-like shadow. By the time they finished describing this, bizarre entity to their friends, Mr. S saw the same silhouette approach from the same vicinity of the bizarre object. Only 3 of the party claimed to see this thing. They said that the creature stood about 8 to 10 feet tall and looked glossy but not shiny. It had a round, helmeted head, broad shoulders, and pointed hands. The legs were not visible through the scrub, but they claimed that the movement of the being looked like it was on rollers or floating rather than walking. By this point, absolutely terrified by this double whammy of the bizarre UFO-like object and this creepy, floating silhouette shadow being, the kids hid in some long grass by the roadside, fearful of what this thing was going to do when it simply vanished. Although the sighting of the weird shadow lasted only about 30 seconds, the gang waited 30 minutes in the brush hiding before they decided to vamoose. They got a ride out of the basin from a guy who said that he too had heard some weird noise. Now, they actually returned later with one of their fathers to try and salvage the car. However, in the short time that they were back in the area, they claimed that a large pair of eyes appeared in the nearby trees. One of the group threw a stick in that direction, and the eyes immediately vanished. And I know the thing you're all really in suspense about, no, the car was completely unsalvageable. Now, this is truly a funky little case, and in my opinion, it sounds kind of like a Scooby-Doo episode gone haywire. I mean, you have this bunch of kids, and they go and enjoy a picnic in an old sedan at a paranormal location, only to get embroiled in a paranormal occurrence of their very own. Now, all jokes or pop culture references aside, there are some really classic high strangeness aspects to this case, starting with, the car not starting. Now, reports of the time, once Mr. S did finally report this, specifically from the Unidentified Flying Objects Investigation Center of Australia, detailed their belief that the car stopping and then, lighting on fire probably had nothing to do with UFO. Now, I think a little bit differently from that. Much like the infamous Marlinton encounter detailed a while ago on my channel, this case started when the car stopped. In both of these encounters, a car stoppage, in this case, the car not starting, led the witness to see the anomaly. Now, in this case, the anomaly was this bizarre disc-shaped object in Marlinton, a Bigfoot-like creature. However, in both cases, the car did finally start up again, only to stop a little bit later with the return of the anomaly. Again, craft versus Bigfoot-like creature. In each case, too, the car was totally fried, or in this case, on fire. Now, on a side note, I want to compile a list of cases in which people went looking for paranormal stuff and actually experienced something. I'll just say they are way luckier in this venture than I've been. I mean, of course, I've had bizarre experiences throughout my life, but they've been at total random. Anytime I've set out to go to some paranormal location, whether it's a Bigfoot hotspot, a haunted location, a place where UFOs are supposed to be seen very regularly, I have gotten nothing. So, lucky, lucky people. Speaking of lucky people, it's also of note that Mr. S only reported this sighting after another sighting years later of strange lights in the sky. I would love a little bit more info on this one, because many researchers have claimed that witnesses of kind of close contact anomalous encounters often become repeaters. And one of the most common things that they repeatedly see are these anomalous, kind of sourceless lights. Now, in addition to the strong physical reaction of the car literally lighting on fire, this case has some kind of interesting physiological reactions as well, namely this headache. Apparently, everyone who saw the object heard the noise, and everyone who experienced both of these things got a terrible headache, which throbbed in sync with the noise of the object and the pulsing of this light. Except, of course, for the girl who refused to look at the object. So she did not experience the object at all, she refused to look at it, and somehow she was spared from this throbbing headache. Now, it seems as though witness reaction, whether emotional or physical, can be seen as almost a fundamental condition of the sighting. In this case, although the witnesses were terrified of the sighting, they didn't cite the extreme terror or extreme calmness as someone impressed by the anomaly itself. However, what they instead had was this very strong, again, physiological reaction of a headache that literally kind of moved in sync with the anomaly itself. So it does seem that still, um, close contact with anomalies, it has some sort of impression on the witness. Again, whether that's something physical like this headache, or something emotional like the extreme terror or the extreme calmness, or something that may be a blend of both. Again, the paralysis that's cited in so many of these cases, I think that this is more a condition of the sighting itself rather than kind of, a nearly unrelated side effect just to something out of the ordinary. Now, finally, there is kind of the, pièce de résistance, the very dramatic aspect of this encounter, which is this bizarre shadow type thing that was observed by several members of the party, including the reporting witness. Now, the sketch produced of the thing, it's odd because apparently one of the most prevalent stories of Bent's Basin is that it seems to have lots of sightings of the Yowie, or as I'm sure a lot of my American audience knows it, the Australian Bigfoot. When you look at this sketch, in my mind, it's very similar kind of to a silhouette of the Yowie, this kind of broad-shouldered, extremely tall, man-like shape. And it's, again, this kind of weird triple point anomaly then, as it's connected to this UFO sighting and moving in this apparitional kind of rolling or floating motion. Not to mention, like so many anomalies, this thing literally just vanished. It was there one moment, gone the next. So again, in my mind, it looks very similar. I think very often in terms of silhouettes with different types of paranormal phenomena, where it's, you see these kind of similar aspects throughout every different field of research, whether cryptozoological, spectrological, or ufological. And so here, there's this effectively kind of like shadow apparition or shadow man, which is clothed in the trappings of a UFO encounter due to its proximity to a UFO. Also in a place, and again, the silhouette kind of mimics this, where there's like a longer running history of Yowie sightings. Now, to cap it all off, you also have this fantastic sighting of eyes when some of the group went back to try and salvage the car. This is a classic trope of cryptid sightings and often a defining feature of the encounter. You'll have all of these reports where people will only notice the eyes, or the eyes seem to be the most prevalent part. And again, this is just another one of those cross-genre type features, popping up also in UFO encounters and, of course, haunted houses. Now, it seems, to me at least, that this focus of the eyes encounters is kind of symbolic of being observed by the very thing that we are observing. All in all, this encounter seems like a very good example of what Keel dubbed the window areas. These places where it just seems like no matter what the anomaly is, they seem to attract or simply have or propagate more unexplained phenomena. Now, this place, Bent's Basin, is known as a location rife with more historically inclined sightings, such as hauntings or Yowie sightings. And it just so happens then that this is also the place where this group of kids has a dramatic and, in all likelihood, traumatic UFO encounter. This concept that, whatever the anomaly, it just seems like there are places where they're more likely to happen. It points, in my mind at least, to the concept that the perceived differences between each type of anomaly may be of really little importance, and that the truth is that they're simply different expressions of some same core mystery. Now, this bizarre event occurred on the French island of Réunion, in the Indian Ocean near Madagascar, on the 31st of July, 1968. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, a 31-year-old farmer by the name of Monsieur Luce Fontaine was out gathering grass for his rabbits in a small clearing in a forest of acacia trees, when he suddenly saw what he referred to as an oval-shaped cabin, about 25 meters away. Now, this egg-shaped object, or cabin, as Luce called it, was about 4 or 5 meters above the ground. However, unlike most UFOs, it was not hovering or floating there. Rather, it was supported on a kind of stalk or foot, which appeared to be made out of shining glass or metal and flared towards the bottom. Now, this stalk was reflected in the same fashion above, forming a symmetrical object. Now, the witness claimed that the cabin itself appeared translucent in the middle. He described it as kind of like the windscreen on a car, and this kind of light blue shade. The outer edges, he claimed, were a darker blue and less opaque, and that the whole thing shone like aluminum. Now, if this bizarre object was not weird enough, Luce claimed that through the central windscreen-like section of the cabin, he could see two small individuals, each roughly 90 centimeters or around 3 feet tall. They both were wearing, and strap yourselves in for this one, corrugated padded coveralls, that the witness likened to that of the Michelin Man. Both beings were facing away from Luce when he first saw them. However, as soon as he noticed them, immediately the one on the left turned all the way around to face him, while the one on the right turned its head to look at him. Luce could then see that their faces were obscured by some type of translucent helmet. Both beings then turned their backs to him, and as soon as this happened, Luce's vision was absorbed by a bright flash of light, which he claimed to be as intense as the arc of a welding machine. Not only did everything turn this bright white, but he claimed that there was a gust of wind and a flash of powerful heat. Finally, when his vision came back, the object was completely gone. Now, Luce informed his wife of what had happened, as well as local law enforcement, who eventually undertook an investigation. Surprisingly enough, they actually found a degree of radioactivity, very slight, on grass and pebbles in the area where Luce claimed that the object had been, though no other trace of it remained. His clothes also retained traces of radioactivity, though it is claimed that this was only on the sides of his clothing that had faced the object, and this was even after a period of 10 days had elapsed. I will also note that when this was reported in Flying Saucer Review, it was titled Contact Casualty on Reunion. This is due to reports that circulated that the witness, Luce Fontaine, had experienced the effects of radiation poisoning so badly that he was flown to the Curie Foundation in Paris. However, this was quickly found not to be the case. Rather, these rumors had actually been started by the Fontaine family to get themselves some peace and quiet from the constant barrage of investigators looking into the event. It is true, however, that Luce claimed to have suffered some slight effects from proximity to radiation, though as to what extent, I'm not sure. Now, in addition to Luce's case, a couple of weeks later, a cigar-shaped object was also spotted over Reunion. Now, the first thing that really caught my eye in this case was the drawing from the description, which showed this kind of egg-shaped object with the two entities inside, and then this kind of flared stalk on either side, above and below. Now, the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that was the symbol of the world tree. Now, specifically, the first thing that came to my mind was the Norse representation of this, which is Yggdrasil, which is usually portrayed as having these flared roots and flared branches, with Midgard in the center in this kind of oval or egg shape because it's encircled by the serpent Jormungandr. Now, to go a step even further as far as, this particular representation, but also other mythological representations, some scholars dictate that the tree known as Hadmaimus Holt, where the two sole survivors of Ragnarok eventually hide, is just another name for Yggdrasil. So again, and this is a very tenuous step, but is this a possible connection to the two beings inside of this, supposed craft or cabin? This trifecta of trees or columns, two beings, as well as a serpent-like entity, this is a common thread seen through many world mythologies, not least of which include Christianity and Shintoism. Now, the symbolism in this encounter is continued in the central object being this egg shape, through which these hidden figures are revealed through the translucent windscreen. And at its core, the two, feet or stalks that connect the cabin, connect it both to the earth as well as the sky. I know I just mentioned this in a recent video, the silver-suited soil sampler, that it seems as though, when people experience these anomalies, there seems to be callouts both to other worlds above and below. And in this case, I think it's really interesting that you have, again, these very strong kind of symbolic elements to something which also had a very highly non-symbolic aspect, which is that this guy was exposed to radiation. Now, once again, true, the levels were said to be non-dangerous, just higher than normal. This was a good 10 days after the event that things were measured, though. Especially given that this sighting, this event, produced this wave of heat and a brilliant flash of light, as well as the accompanying radiation. This is a really great case to kind of explore the dichotomy of a very symbolic experience, which is accompanied by a physically measurable series of events. It's something truly paradoxical. There are other aspects of this case, too, that fall into the many patterns that I'm extremely interested in, such as the flash of light, which in this case ended the encounter. The gust of wind, which is seen not just in UFO encounters, but in the fairy faith, as well as even, the strange drafts that people feel in haunted locations. In addition to this, there's also the aspect of how both beings acknowledged the witness's presence. When they were done, it appeared as though the encounter was done altogether. And I know I've been going on recently about how it seems as though so many encounters with anomalous beings, there is this interplay of the witness being witnessed by the thing that they are witnessing. Now, finally, one of the most intriguing facts about this encounter to me is that, You have this highly symbolic encounter, which is accompanied by physically measurable events, and then the beings inside of the object. The man claimed were dressed as almost little Michelin man. Yet again, it shows that whatever these central anomalies truly are, whatever that form is, if there even is a central form, it does appear to clothe itself in the dressings or trappings of any given time or culture. September 1954. 12-year-old John Jacob Swaim was on a tractor on his family's fields when he suddenly noticed someone or something standing off nearby. Now, this thing ended up being a short entity with pointed ears and a pointed nose, crouched down, watching him. Now, this case occurred around dusk on September 2nd, 1954, and involved 12-year-old John Jacob, not Jingleheimer Schmidt, but Swaim of Coldwater, Kansas. He had been disking on a tractor on his family's wheat field and said that it had taken longer than it should have due to some trouble with the tractor. At about 8 o'clock, he turned the machine off and began walking back to his home when he noticed someone crouched nearby watching him. So this someone, who was poised about 20 feet away from where John Jacob was an entity about as tall as a 5-year-old child, so roughly about 3 feet tall, with pointed ears, pointed nose, and a, to quote John, mean expression. He claimed that he wore sort of shiny tan clothing and it had 2 cylinders on his back. This being stared at John for a couple of seconds before moving very quickly. John Jacob said that it was almost like he flew away from him to a nearby flying saucer. John Jacob only noticed this saucer when he saw the little being run towards it. He said that it was halfway hidden by a nearby terrace. He claimed that the saucer was about 50 feet in diameter, just floating in the sky about 5 feet above the ground and about 100 yards away from where the being was first spotted. In one newspaper account, he's actually quoted as saying that it was shaped like a flying cucumber. The entity jumped in a door and the object rose straight up and completely soundlessly into the sky before heading off to the southwest, at which point John could see lights shining from windows in the craft. When John Jacob was asked how fast the object moved, he said that compared to it, a jet would seem like a turtle. Very descriptive kid. As soon as the object was out of sight, John Jacob ran home and told his father, also John Swaim, what had occurred. Now, the boy's family insisted that he really wasn't the sort of kid given to telling stories or tall tales, and so his father took the event seriously enough to call the local sheriff, Sheriff Hadley, who told him to just stay away from the area until the next day. The next day, Mr. Swaim and Sheriff Hadley went to the scene of the sighting, where they actually claimed to find a number of footprints. They said that 3 complete prints showed small wedge-shaped impressions, about 4.5 inches long and 2 inches wide at the toes, which then kind of tapered off to very narrow heels. Swaim, familiar with tracks in the area, said that they didn't match any animal tracks he had ever seen, and looked like they'd been made by someone or something running in a soft shoe. Now, of all the aspects of this case, however, my absolute favorite has got to be the picture which was included in the Wichita Beacon of John Jacob and his brother and sister holding kittens, which was captioned, "John Jacob's story brought more excitement to the Swaim household than the fun of playing with kittens." I mean, come on, you really don't get very many gems like that. Seriously though, aside from the kittens, this is one of those really kind of fantastic early mid-century classic cases of humanoid contact, and is certainly dusted, or perhaps fairy dusted, with folkloric motifs. The first to stand out to me is the agricultural setting. This is yet another one of those encounters that seems as though just a modern translation of earlier encounters with the good folk, or the fairies, had by people tending the earth. Also, another kind of folkloric motif in this case is the pointed ears of the entity. Now, this aspect, while heavily popularized in the Victorian era to represent fairies or elves, and of course extremely common even today in popular culture, has been a staple of fairy iconography at least since the Middle Ages, with some people tying in, the kind of demonization of the fairy faith by Christianity, or also even going even further back to the portrayals of the Greek satyrs. Now, interestingly enough, too, another early mid-century classic, that of the Kelly Hopkinsville case, also portrayed these beings as having pointed ears as kind of the popular image of the entities observed there. Now, kind of juxtaposing the kind of classic folkloric aspects of this entity, you have the outfit of the being, complete with the little canisters on the back, which John Jacob actually believed was how it could fly so quickly back to the saucer. Now, in my opinion, these occurrences, these anomalies, whatever you want to call them, do effectively clothe themselves or mask themselves in the concepts of a time to try and make sense of themselves, unless this is the witness's own perceptions or own mindset kind of clothing whatever this anomaly truly is in concepts that would make sense to the witness. Who knows? So, here, the jetpack-like canisters on the back of the outfit, the shiny outfit, they really seem like a reference to the modern folklore of the UFOnauts. Effectively, what we have here is almost an elf riding a UFO. Here, too, is another case with a fantastic example of an extremely, decidedly creepy attribute of many anomalous encounters. This thing was watching John Jacob. It really begs the question why some super advanced race of extraterrestrial beings that have somehow conquered spaceflight to be able to get here from wherever else they are from wouldn't have a decent enough surveillance system just to watch a kid on a tractor from the safety of their ship. In my opinion, the constant, oops, you caught me routine of all sorts of paranormal entities is more of a call out to the symbol of the observer and the observed, rather than just accidental. Also evident here is the concept of perfect timing. If the tractor hadn't had problems, which, given the proximity of the so-called craft, we could speculate that this may also fall into the category of vehicular failure. But anyway, regardless of, a mundane or extra-mundane reason for the tractor's failure, John Jacob should not have been there alone or that late in the day. But he was. And this just so happened to be the day that a UFO shows up and this little guy comes out and is watching him. Genuinely, again, it's one of those perfect timing type scenarios. This is another case, too, where, however subjective or immaterial the occurrence was or seemed to be, here, again, we have this totally soundless event of a craft going supposedly much faster than even a jet, something that should have caused some sort of disturbance. So effectively, bending the laws of physics, where there was trace evidence in the form of these bizarre wedge-shaped footprints. And yet again, we have the departure of this anomaly heralded by light. Now, the craft was not lit up, it wasn't luminous until the little being jumped inside of it and it took off. I've said it a million times if I've said it once, throughout a variety of anomalous encounters, whether it's UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, whatever, it seems as though light phenomena occurs at these juncture points in the experience, usually beginning or ending the occurrence. You can keep up with me on my free blog at patreon.com/justanothertinfoilhat. And for today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.